I'm Chris Ashmore and welcome to Master Your Market. Business owners, we're told we've got to work on our business, not in our business. But hang on a minute, not all businesses are the same. What if you work on your own and your clients are paying you for your skills? You can't not work in your business. And it's these people who my guest today coaches. Col Fink is a business advisor, speaker, and author. He's also got this wonderful blog called The Fink Tank, and he does these wonderful videos with his cameraman brother, Cam Fink, which they post onto LinkedIn, which are just going gangbusters. Col's a great communicator, and he's got a bunch of tips on how to master your market. Welcome to Master Your Market. Col Fink, I love that name. Thank you so much for joining me. I like it because it's bang, bang, Col Fink.
I love it because I can get it as a username on every single platform in the world because nobody else is called Col Fink.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, there is one other Colin Fink, but he never goes by Col. So I can, Col Fink at Gmail, Col Fink at whatever. I get Col Fink at everything.
Oh, that's good. That's important because there's always another one of us out there that these days you need that. Now, I'm going to jump straight in with the first question. That is maybe an obvious question, but then I'm thinking maybe it's not an obvious question. Is there a difference between a business owner someone who's running a business versus someone who's running a solo practice?
I think there is, because if you think about an intrapreneur, someone who works in a business, they join a business. And an entrepreneur, which tends to be the person we're talking about when people talk about business owners, they're talking about entrepreneurs. And an entrepreneur kind of creates a business. And I think a solopreneur is the business. And there's an important distinction whether you're the person who created the business rather than you are the person who actually is the business, because there are a number of things which you will do strategically differently, I think, if you know that, in fact, you are the business. And so when you're a solopreneur, if you're sick that day, the business is going into a holding pattern at best. So if I'm sick, no one's going to go and run the training program or deliver the keynote speech or do the coaching on my behalf. If I'm sick that day, well, the business just pauses for the day and waits until I get back. And what's important about knowing that actually you are the business is it puts a much greater focus and importance on how you personally feel about everything that's happening in the business, because you are the business. And so, for example, there might be some really great marketing strategy that you could be using, but if you don't like doing it and it doesn't make you feel good and it doesn't energize you and light you up, well, then it's not a great marketing strategy for your business because you are the business. And so when you recognize that you are a solopreneur, now that doesn't mean that you have to work alone. Like, I pay a graphic designer to do my stuff, and I have a full-time assistant in the Philippines and a part-time business manager here in Australia. So, by a strict definition, I'm not a solo business. But the point is, my assistant and my business manager, they're not going to do the speech. They're not going to do the training program. They're not going to record the podcast with Chris. Yep. When you recognize that you are the business, it means that you can personalize everything you do, and you take your own personal feelings and energies and proclivities much more seriously, and you design a business which is designed to make the most of who you are specifically, rather than design a business which is designed to attract the right person to do this job or that job. And it leads to very different decisions in developing the strategy that you're going to use to grow your business. And if you ignore it, it means you end up growing a business that you don't even like. And usually that means it doesn't perform very well. Whereas if you design a business that you love running, it will typically perform pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good definition. I've always thought too that as a solopreneur, your team that's around you, whether you outsource, have freelancers or hire them directly, they're there to support you. I could be wrong here, but if you're running a business, you're there to support your team, kind of thing.
Yeah, Like, yeah, I think when you're running a business, absolutely, like your job is to create an environment where your team can do the very best. And often as an entrepreneur, you're not actually the one doing much of the work. In fact, you're just creating the environment for other people to do the work. And you're right, in a solopreneurial business, it's exactly the opposite. Your team is there to create the most fertile ground for you to do the work.
Yep.
And so, but as an example of like the difference between what's good advice for someone in a standard style business as an entrepreneur or a solo business as a solopreneur, you'll often hear, and I think this idea originated in the E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber, where he said, stop working in your business and spend as much of your time as you can working on your business. Like that's a really common piece of advice that we hear bandied around. Well, when you're a solopreneur, if you spend all your time working on your business rather than in your business, it's not making any money.
Yeah.
I don't want to work on my business. I want to work in it. I want to be doing speeches and training programs and delivering the value that I can deliver because that's how I make money. Yep. Of course, I work on my business some of the time, but to take that advice literally the way it's given, like that would actually be bad advice for a solopreneur. And so knowing that you're running a solo business can be a really important realization to have, because most of the good business advice out there, or at least a lot of it, is actually pretty poor advice for people who are running a solo business. And once you've had that realization, you can go, oh, cool, that's good advice, but not for me.
Yeah. Now, Col, you've written a few books, but you've got a third book that's about to be released, The Solo Pro. What's it about? So
there's this magical, it's almost like a liminal space. There's this magical business opportunity that not many people know of, which I think, certainly if you're anything like me, is the sweet spot for living a fruitful, meaningful, and freedomful life in the modern world. It's a common place to go if you're a corporate refugee. So a lot of people will join the corporate world in their early to mid-20s post-university, and then they climb the corporate ladder and they do a decade or two or even three of, doing the work in the corporate world. And at some point they wake up and they realize they're just jack of it.
Yep.
And maybe they feel like they could get paid more, or maybe they're getting paid really well. But often what leads people to leave the corporate world is they feel like their work is in some way meaningless, or they feel like their freedom is really impinged because they're really at the mercy of whatever this big business machine wants from them. They have to take holidays when they're told to. They get a limited amount of holidays or whatever. And so at some point, there's a lot of people who go, you know what, I'm going to strike out on my own. And I reckon for a lot of those kind of corporate refugees, as I described them, the sweet spot is to become a solo pro. And what that basically means is you become a consultant, and you're often selling back to the business world. So you're a B2B consultant, but you're running it in a solo business, and you're taking the decade or decades of experience and the insight and knowledge that you have around some particular topic, and you sell that insight back to larger organizations so they can apply it. And you might sell it as keynote speeches and you go to conferences, or you might sell it as consulting and you work on projects for them. You might train the people who are going to run the projects, or you might do coaching and mentoring and that kind of thing. Basically what you're doing though is you're turning you and your expertise and your experience and your insight, and you're turning that into a business. And I think it's possible to work 1,000 hours a year and make $500 an hour. And 1,000 hours a year kind of works out to 20 to 25 hours per week. So like a little bit, like essentially a part-time job with 2 whole months off, right? So 2 months where you just take care of yourself, look after your own energy. And obviously if you're making $500 an hour, working 1,000 hours a year, you can do the maths pretty quickly. It's $500,000. There's this magical opportunity for smart people with useful insights and a willingness to do the work on themselves to get good at whatever it is they need to get really good at, to get into that above average to elite category, to make really good money in a really meaningful way, and critically for me, in a really freedomful way, in a way where you have much more control over your time, over your holidays, over the way that you work and when you work and all that kind of stuff. And so the Solo Pro, the book, is about the step-by-step strategy to taking whoever you are and whatever you know and turning it into a financially really successful business that allows you to do meaningful work in a freedomful way.
That's fantastic. So $500 an hour, 1,000. That's well broken down, actually. That kind of makes sense. And you're only working 25 hours a week. That's fantastic.
Well, I reckon on the 25 hours a week thing.
Yeah.
Because obviously the standard work week is that sort of 38 to 45 or whatever.
Yep.
I don't really think many people work 40 hours a week, to be honest.
No.
Maybe they go into the office, but most people don't actually work that much. And so one of my great goals for the Solo Pro, the book, and the program that I run around it, and just everything that I do really, is to try to convince the modern world of workers that it's okay to stop pretending you're working when you're not actually working.
Yeah.
I want all of us to recognize that we actually do somewhere between 3 and 5 hours of good work a day.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, just freaking stop. Just stand up, go outside, walk your dog, go for a run, play with your kids, do whatever. Stop sitting at your desk pretending that you're being productive when you're not.
And we pretend to ourselves, not so much to the boss either. Isn't there a term for it where, like, it amazes me that you go to work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You just happen to get everything done exactly by 5 p.m. every day, do you? No, of course you don't. And that illustrates what you say there. There's a term for it, though. I can't remember it. But you're absolutely right. And I find, because I've been working for myself on my own here for a couple of years now, and I just get the thing done. I don't. In the beginning, I felt guilty that I finish at 2:00 in the afternoon, so I just sit here and do other work. I don't do that now, but you're right. You focus on what the work needs to be done, and less so on what the clock tells you to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you can, it actually took me a long time to maybe untrain what our culture had taught me about what it means to be productive. I had a really bad habit of telling myself that I had to sit at my desk for 8 hours a day or more, 10 hours, 12 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
And even after I had this epiphany where I was like, no one's here, like no one's watching me, no one's measuring the amount of time at my desk. I should be measuring myself based on the impact that I have and the value that I deliver. But even after I had that epiphany, I was going to say it took many years. It's taking many years. I still sometimes find myself sitting at my desk and go, crap, I'm not doing anything. Why am I here? And remind myself, it's okay. Get up, go outside, go and play disc golf, go and fiddle in the shed, go and play with your kids. And it's a lesson that I want as many people in the world to learn. It's an epiphany I want as many people in the modern world to realize is we don't have to work that much. We're ridiculously productive these days. Do a few hours of good work and then go and live your life.
Absolutely. Do you think that those who move from the corporate world or from a regular paying job into being a solo pro, do they have certain attributes that others perhaps don't?
A few years ago, I would have said yes. And funnily enough, at this point, I have more than a decade of experience in coaching and mentoring and guiding people through this journey. And the more I learn, the more I realize that, like, almost anyone can make it work, to be honest. And it's not that there is a particular set of skills or a particular set of talents that you have to have. The key is that whoever you are and whatever it is you're good at, what you have to find is what works for you. So, for example, a lot of people would say it's easier to do this if you're an extrovert. It's easier to do this if you're willing to put yourself out there and talk to big crowds and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, okay, that is easier to do if you want your marketing strategy to be going to networking events or speaking on conference stages. But there are loads of introverts that succeed at this game. They just market themselves in a different way. So there are a few things that a solo pro really does have to do successfully in order to make a business which is commercially successful. And for example, marketing and sales are an example of two of the things that sometimes people find a little intimidating, or they're not sure if they're going to be able to do them.
Yep.
So if you're already really good at marketing and sales, that's definitely an advantage.
Yep.
But there isn't some particular type of person you have to be. You simply have to work out, what's a way of marketing that works well for me? Is there a way that I can use my existing proclivities or talents or abilities or whatever and apply it so that I can have strangers find out about me and become neighbors, if that makes sense, and turn neighbors into friends and friends into BFFs? Like, all you got to do is, if there are people out there in the world who you could help, you need them to find out about you. That's what marketing is.
Yep.
And so there isn't any particular way you have to do it, but you do have to find a way to do it. Yep. And your way is going to resonate with whoever you are and however you like to work. And so there isn't a particular type of person who's a better solo pro than the others, but everybody has to take responsibility for the marketing, for the sales, and for the delivery of massive value when you go to work. And I guess if you're going to say anything, if you're not willing to take responsibility for those three things, then you're going to struggle. I never see someone outsource marketing or sales or delivery effectively. You gotta take responsibility for that yourself.
Indeed, absolutely. Well, then, can I ask you, Col, how do you, this is called Master Your Market, how do you market yourself?
So I used to run a go-kart manufacturing business 15, 18 years ago, how long it was. Yeah. And in the relatively early days of YouTube, I actually started videoing myself kind of talking through the technical aspects of racing go-karts, right? So I was in an industry with people like Daniel Ricciardo, right? I taught him a little bit about what he knows about how to drive.
Oh, wow.
Friends with Jamie Whincup and people like that. Like, I know the entire supercars grid because all those guys were kids when I was making cars. Anyway,
Right. Yep.
I used to video myself teaching technical aspects of racing. And as a result, I got used to talking to camera. Like, I broke through that barrier that people have of talking to camera because I was teaching these technical karting things. And what that meant was, once I closed down that business and went through my transition and realized that I wanted to be a solo pro, I had this already relatively developed, relatively refined ability to talk to camera.
Yep.
So I thought, cool, I'm going to keep doing that. So I just kept videoing myself and posting it to LinkedIn. But so my marketing strategy pretty much comes down to, I post on LinkedIn most days. So most weekdays, probably on average, I would post 4 times a week. And it would be everything from kind of educational pieces where I'm teaching how to be a successful solo pro, right down to just ridiculous things that are happening in my day-to-day life. Like, I use LinkedIn as a very social kind of media, and I'll poke fun at myself all the time. In addition to that, I write a newsletter, a semi-regular newsletter. Discipline is not my thing. So rather than committing to, going every Wednesday at 11 a.m., the strapline of my newsletter is useful insights at random intervals. And I send it every week except for the weeks that I don't, if that makes sense. And I would say I average maybe 30 to 35 newsletters a year would go out. And then the other thing that I do, which has been both really fun and like a runaway success. My brother Cam now lives in New Zealand, which means we don't get a chance to see each other as often. Interestingly, though, when he comes over to Australia, because he lives in New Zealand now, he makes a much bigger effort to come and see me and my family when he's over. And so we started a thing called the Friday Think Tank. And our surname's Fink. It's called the Think Tank. Get it? Very clever. And what we do is we set up 2 kids' chairs next to the dam next to my house. And Cam is a videographer, so he sets up 5 or 6 different cameras. Like, it's a bit of a production. But essentially, we just sit down and talk about whatever we find interesting. And it's absolutely wonderful because it gives Cam and I kind of a reason to hang out. And so as brothers, middle-aged blokes, it's easy to drift apart from your family and your friends. And this gives Cam and I just a really good reason to hang out. And we'll film the think tank for an hour or two and then hang out for the rest of the day.
Yep.
We get to share ideas with each other. Like, one of the rules we have for the think tank is that we don't plan it. Just one of us will introduce an idea and the other one responds to it. We haven't scripted it or talked about it at all.
Right?
In fact, we deliberately avoid talking about it first so that the fizz is still in the bottle.
Uh-huh.
And then he edits it up. I'm very lucky. He does all the hard yards of editing the episodes. And they end up kind of 5 to 10 minutes long. And he posts them as a video to LinkedIn every single Friday. Yep. And as a method of marketing, it has been ridiculously successful because when you see Cam and I interacting, you see the real us. Like, Cam and I have been friends since the day I was born. We've been best mates. And so you get to see us truly be us. Like, it's a very authentic communication of who we are because we literally are just two mates laughing with each other.
Yep.
And when you're a solo pro, when people buy your services, they're partly buying your expertise, or they're buying the problem that you're going to help them solve, or they're buying the training program, they're buying whatever. But actually, a lot of what they're buying is the chance to hang out with you. Yep. And what the think tank has done for Cam and I is it's meant that 10,000 strangers now know exactly what we're like. And I'm sure some people think we're idiots, and that's fine, right? But there's a whole bunch of people who think we're really fun and funny and engaging and warm and whatever. I'm saying a bunch of things that I'd like people to think about me, obviously. But and what it means is it breaks down the barriers that they might have to reaching out to us. And so, like, you know how we all hate cold calling other people? No one wants to cold call a potential client. Well, newsflash, potential clients hate cold calling you. And if you're a total stranger, they don't want to ring you. And so, but if you've done something like Cam and I do with the think tank, or like you're doing with this video podcast, it means your audience gets to know who you are as a person. Yeah. And when they have the problem come up that they think you can help them solve, ringing you is no longer a cold call because they know who you are. They know what you're like. They're familiar with you as a person. So then there's not that awkward social barrier to them ringing you. And so the think tank has been probably the best piece of marketing that I've ever done, because it has allowed thousands and thousands of people to understand what I'm like, the type of person I am. And if they also want to, if they like me and they also want to grow a business as a solo pro, it's a no-brainer. They're going to give me a ring.
Absolutely. And those videos, I mean, they're so well done. They look great. The videography is amazing, of course, thanks to Cam. The authenticity comes, I think, because you're both there in the same location. There's even more of that connection between you when you're interacting with each other than versus what we're doing here. I mean, it's very good that what we're doing here, Cole, and I feel connected with you. But nothing beats that sort of being in the same room or in the same part of the forest.
Yeah, oh, totally. Cam, before Cam and I did the think tank, during COVID, he was over in New Zealand, and I didn't see him for a couple of years because he's stuck over there. But he did the videography and the production for, I forgot what they called it, but my friends Digby Scott and Alicia Mackay, Alicia's Cam's partner, they did a very similar video podcast where they sat with each other in Digby's living room looking out over the ocean, and they essentially bounced ideas off each other. Now, each of them run a solo business, and they actually target quite different markets. Like, Alicia was principally focused on sort of local government, and Digby's on the change makers in corporates. But because those two smart people, interesting people, together in a room, bouncing ideas off each other, laughing and having fun, it was super engaging to watch. I watched every single episode from start to finish, and I'm sure it had a similarly positive impact on both of their businesses. There is really something to finding ways to market yourself where you are with other people, and given the opportunity to bounce off each other, it's much easier to turn into that authentic, likable version of yourself when you're with others.
That's it. That's right. Now, we're almost running out of time, Cole. Col. It's funny. A podcast can go forever. I don't know why we say that. We're running out of time. We're not running out of time, but we've got to wrap it up at some stage. Sorry, that's a little pet hate, and I'm using it myself. But for anyone, I suppose, who is thinking, just to wrap it all back to the beginning, Col, if anyone is thinking of perhaps giving up their day job, they've always thought about going out on their own, maybe there's a bit of fear there, or whatever it is, do you have any words of advice or inspiration for them?
So there's a fundamental misconception about security that I think is really interesting, because a lot of people, there is a lot of fear associated with quitting your job and going out on your own. And a lot of it is around the perceived lack of security of being out on your own. And I think that whilst there is a degree of lack of security of being out on your own, like the world is, it can be an unkind place. It's a Darwinian world of evolution, survival of the fittest out there. I think that there is an unwarranted belief in the security of employment, and that you're not actually comparing apples with apples. And so I'm reminded of a conversation I had once with a bit of an old timer. He was in his late 60s, early 70s when I spoke to him, and he was an accountant. And he related the story of how he'd gone to university and made friends with these three other guys, and they'd gone through university together. They'd become CPAs, and three of them went off and worked for kind of the big traditional firms, whatever. And one of them struck it out on his own. And the three that worked for the traditional firms thought he was like a risk taker, basically. Oh, throwing yourself to the wolves here, blah, blah, blah. So the ones in employment, they work their way up the ladder as best they can. And the one running his own business, he grows it as best as he can. And then at some point in time, the crash happens. Oh, I don't know which crash it was. Maybe it was the 80s one. Maybe it was the 70s one. But whatever. Yep. The global financial, whatever happens. And the whole market shrinks dramatically. So one of the employed guys keeps his job. And the guy who runs his own business, his revenue halves basically overnight.
Yep.
But two of the guys that are employed get fired, get retrenched, which is essentially what that's saying is their revenue dropped to zero overnight. And so whilst they all perceived the one who'd gone out on his own to have been the one taking the risk, he was actually the one distributing the risk. Because when the market shrank, his business shrank. Whereas those who were employed, they coin flipped for their future. Because those companies also halved in revenue, and that meant they needed to halve their expenses as well. Yeah. And so they fired half of everybody. Yeah. So if you're wondering whether you should go out on your own, yes, there is that kind of period of trepidation where you're not sure it's going to work. You do have to take responsibility for the marketing, the sales, and the delivery of your expertise to create value for people out in the world. And once you get kind of to and beyond a certain threshold of capability, so it's not just that you're good at your thing, but you're good at running the business around it as well. Once you're over that threshold, you have the most secure job in the world, because you are unemployable directly at this point, because you're so good at what you do and so good at marketing it and selling it that you can make way more with your time working for yourself than you ever could working for someone else. And it doesn't matter what the market does. It doesn't matter what global financial calamity comes along. You are equipped to deal with it better than almost anyone else is. And you're in the perfect position to do so, because when you're in a solo business, your number one capability compared to traditional businesses is adaptability and responsiveness. No matter how quickly the world changes, you can be ready with something new tomorrow, right? When COVID happened, solo businesses had pivoted in 24 hours. When ChatGPT came around, solo businesses had pivoted in 24 hours. Big businesses are still responding to that. They still can't work out how to get their people back in the office. They don't know how to react. It takes years to turn the ship around. We can respond in a day to anything, and it makes you the most secure employment of all. And it just takes the courage to step out on your own and do it, and then the willingness to do the work to get good at the things that you need to put around yourself to make sure that your skills can be sold for $500 an hour.
There we go. Well done. Well said, Colin. I'm gonna put some of that dramatic Hollywood music through that, because if that hasn't convinced anyone, I don't know what will. Col Fink, thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom, and I'll put all your details in the show notes for listeners, and for viewers, but for now, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. It's been great fun. Cheers, mate.